In this tutorial, you'll learn about some of the masking options that show up as pop-up dialogues when you have an active selection or path and click on any of the orange apply buttons or the group button here. For example, if I click L for a lasso selection and drag it around this ice, when I go and click on contrast, I'm explicitly telling Lumenzia that I want to adjust the contrast in this portion of the image, not everywhere. Lumenzia now wants to know, hey, with that selection, do you want to feather it to give a more natural transition at the edges? Do you want to keep a hard edge, which would be more appropriate for something like a building or a cityscape? Or do you want to ignore it, which simply is going to let you keep working with the selection in place so you aren't frequently deselecting and recreating selections, but it actually has nothing to do with Lumenzia itself. Most people will choose to feather the mask, we'll click OK, and we get this nice smooth result. From before to after, there are no obvious transition edges. If there were, or you wanted to further refine the mask here, if we alt click on it, see how it's got this nice smooth feathering that's been applied to it? Well, you can go up to Window, Properties, and then with this mask selected, you can adjust the amount of feathering to control how quickly it transitions from the affected area to the unaffected area. Alternatively, if you have the right preferences set, you can simply double click the mask and you go straight to this. If you don't see this as the default, what you want to do is go up to Photoshop, Preferences, Tools, and then you're looking for this option that says double click layer mask launches selected mask workspace. Make sure that's unchecked, and then the default option when you click on a layer mask will be to see this dialog where you can dial in the feather that you want to use, which is a very handy way of working with Lumenzia. Let's now take a look at a more advanced example. If I want to darken down the sun in this part of the image, well, I'd probably start with a lights mask like Lights 3, which does a good job of selecting this part of the sky, but also has a bunch of extraneous stuff I don't want. So again, using the lasso selection, I can draw a selection around the areas that I want to refine. And now I'm telling Lumenzia to work on this portion of the image with this luminosity. So I'm not going to be adjusting the rocks that are selected down here in the general luminosity mask. I'm also not going to be adjusting this rock because the luminosity mask is taking care of that. So it's the combination of the two that's giving me much more precise targeting. Let's click on a brightness contrast layer, and you have a couple of options. Again, we want to feather the mask just like we did before. This will deal with the selection. And then we have an option of mask type, which is new. We'll go through each of these one by one. The first one, to create a single layer mask, when we click OK, you get a single layer mask. If we alt click it, you can see that it is indeed the luminosity in that portion of the image. If we double click it, we'll see that there's no feathering to adjust. So we've baked in the feathering and you don't have any real control here. Let's hit Command Z to undo that. Let's try this again. This time we'll choose the group layer mask, click OK, and you see that Lumenzia is giving you the luminosity mask as one mask and then a group mask that contains the selection. This selection mask is feathered, so you can change the feathering after the fact as you want. You could also, of course, go in and refine the selection by painting on this layer as well. So you have a lot of control with this approach, but it's also going to add to the file size by having two different layer masks. Let's undo this. And let's click on brightness contrast one last time. This time we'll choose a vector mask. With the vector mask, you have an option of the tolerance. Choosing a high number will give you fewer points on the path in the vector mask. Choosing a lower number will give you a more accurate path. We'll go ahead and click OK. And you can see we have our luminosity mask, and side by side with it is our vector mask. Clicking on the vector mask, you can see that it's also feathered just like we had done before. So we still have all the same control here, but we also have a smaller file because a vector mask does not add anything to the size of the file, unlike the group mask we had created a moment ago. Let's go ahead and make an actual adjustment here. If we double click this and let's bring our brightness down a little bit, we can see from before to after, we have a pretty nice adjustment of the sky here, bringing that down in a smooth and subtle way. We could, of course, go into our vector mask and change its properties to make it much more hard edge or less. Either way, it doesn't make a lot of difference here because the luminosity mask is already doing a good job of feathering from one area to another. So this is one of those cases where it doesn't matter too much, but it is helping us avoid adjustments to the rocks down below. Also, we may want to be more targeted. This adjustment is not just hitting the sky, but I made it pretty big and it's affecting some of the areas of water down below. So if we want to refine this, you can change a vector mask just like any normal vector mask in Photoshop. Go over to the direct selection tool and now draw a little rectangle around the points you want to move, and we can just simply click and drag them up, and we're refining the shape of this adjustment. I'm going to go and drag one more time around this point, bring it in a little bit, and I'm just changing the shape of what's adjusted. So now I have made this adjustment that is going to be more precisely just in the sky area and less in the water with that quick little adjustment.